everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 13. Very excited to have two great guests tonight. We've got Jeff from the St. Louis Cardinals in the ABL, and we've got Dave from the Oakland Athletics, soon to be the Las Vegas Athletics, maybe. And we have a great show tonight because we're having the very first roundtable on the buy, sell, or hold of 10 prospects that came into the year as hot commodities, and maybe they're exiting the year as not so much. So it'd be a good barometer perhaps for the trade market heading into the offseason, which in the ABL is just about to start. So without further ado, I will bring in our esteemed guests. We've got Dave and Jeff. Welcome back to the show, guys. Great to have you on again.
Hey, glad to be here.
All right. And Jeff, you were on episode 1, so you're bookending the whole season. Well, so welcome back. I haven't figured out yet what we're going to do for the off season for ABL Down on the Farm, but it won't be every 2 weeks, I think. But great finish to the season, hopefully. I wanted to do this roundtable. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I think it's kind of a fun way to go into the off season as teams are getting geared up to start trading again. Because we're now entering the part of the year where you're really trying to monetize prospects, whether it's to gain major league talent in ABL or whether it's to upgrade your draft position for some reason. Generally speaking, do you guys have any particular perspective or thoughts that you have going into the offseason when it comes to prospects? Generalized strategy?
I mean, we only have 20 slots, and there's going to be a draft coming up where we will refill some of those slots. So it's kind of obviously your prospects are trade chips. And in the past, when to me, the most valuable commodity in the entire league, in a 30-team league like ABL, is guys on cheap contracts that have kind of already proven themselves at the major league level. And you never know, if a player like that does kind of turn out to be available, I think it makes sense a lot of times to go ahead and like you said, cash your prospects in and take advantage of that and fill a need for your team and make sure that you're going to be competitive for the years ahead.
Yep. Yeah. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I've talked about this, I think, on our last podcast, where I don't really put too much value in the draft just because we can get prospects on the waiver wire at any time. And by the nature of prospecting, new guys pop up all the time. So I kind of feel just like being active on the waiver wire is the best thing you can do with acquiring guys. So with that said, I'll trade anyone just because right. I feel I can replace them with not a ton of margin lost.
Right. We talked about that on the podcast that you were on, about really having confidence in your process and, feeling like you can get something off a wire where other guys might not be paying attention to them, and just the replacement value may be a lot deeper than you think in the prospect pool. I mean, I'm certainly trying to buy low on guys right now at this time of year. If there is a prospect I particularly like scouting report on, or I see some metrics that I like, maybe if some superficial stats are a little low, but I see something I like about the prospect, I might take a chance on him if I can get him. The acquisition cost is important, obviously. And by the same token, I'm trying to sell high on guys that maybe I don't really believe in, but maybe had a strong finish or got some hype towards the end of the year. And can I parlay that into, a closer or some kind of positional player, or can I package a couple guys to really get a real player? Last year I was able to move 2 prospects, Yanquiel Fernandez and Christian Hernandez for Cedric Mullins. So deals like that, that's great. I ended up getting Christian Hernandez back in a deal later in the year because it's ABL, and why wouldn't I? But that's kind of my modus operandi going into this part of the season where we're really trying to, shape our roster headed into the auction draft, which will take place in early 2024. All right. Well, so the format for, this evening's podcast is going to be this buy, sell, or hold rating system for 10 prospects that I selected. And none of the prospects are on our respective rosters. So I wanted to get rid of that bias, at least that they're not in this league. We may have shares of them elsewhere. And I think the philosophy to take in mind is really, if you had the prospect, would you want to be holding them or selling them? And if you saw the prospect on somebody else's roster, would you want to buy them? So where are you, thinking about the prospect right now, headed at this point in time within the ABL scoring format and the structure of the ABL? How are you viewing the prospect? So with that in mind, let's talk about our first prospect of the evening, which will be the Colorado Rockies' Zach Veen, the guy who got a lot of pub when he was coming into the draft, his first year in draft for fantasy, and kind of has had some bouncy seasons and a rough 2023 for the Rockies. And so, Jeff, why don't we start with you? I'll make you the guinea pig for the first time doing this on the show. What's your view on Zach Veen? Buy, sell, hold, and what's your reasoning behind it?
So I have him as a buy at his current level, personally. He was injured, right? And I know he ended up missing like half the season, but from what I was reading, in the middle of his actually 22 season, he had a hand injury that really kind of sapped all power from his swing. And he tried to battle through it through the end of that season and tried to battle through it this season until eventually he went on the IL. So I don't know how well known that is, that he was trying to play injured. And I think a lot of people might just see his huge drop off in stats. And to me, like, he's still a cornerstone piece to Colorado's kind of plans. They just signed Blackman for like a 1-year deal, and it kind of seems like that maybe is a stopgap deal to get them to Veen when he's going to be ready. So, obviously his stats were pretty bad this past year. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. He was still running. He's obviously got great speed, but
that's his calling card. His calling card.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I mean, he's been a low K guy, and when you have guys that don't strike out a lot, that have a ton of speed, playing in cores, that in the BABIP fantasy land, that's generally a recipe for success. So I have Veen as a buy personally.
All right, so there's one buy, and Dave, what about you?
When a guy hasn't, even with injury, if he hasn't had success routinely above high A, because we know the jump from high A to double A is one of the biggest jumps in the minors, prior to just doing the triple A to, or wherever double A to majors jump. So a guy that keeps failing at that point is a tough buy for me. But at the same time, every tool is there. The exit velocity, from what I've heard, is good, even if it seems like he's hitting everything on the ground, which could be a wrist thing. Although I think when you have a wrist injury, typically exit velocity does go. So the fact that exit velocity is still there and he's hitting the ball on the ground a lot kind of sends some red flags my way. I would probably just sell, but at the same time, I kind of look at it the same way. Like if you sold low on Garrett Mitchell last year, he was hurt for most of this year anyway, but you probably lost value because he gained a lot of value with what he showed this year. So, and he had not exactly the same, because his big thing was strikeout issues, but he had full tool set, good numbers on behind the scenes, and just wasn't putting it together until he did in the majors.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. I totally hear what you're saying in terms of Zach not really demonstrating at the higher levels. My question on the sell, right, is like exactly the point you just brought up. Like, are you selling low, and like, what are you really getting for that return at this point? You could argue on that in that way that maybe he's a hold if you have him, right?
Steve, most of the guys in this list tonight are at a low right now. So if you're selling them, you're selling low. It's just
well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, although most of them are. I wouldn't say all of them are.
Right.
But I picked guys who had some warts, right? Because you don't want to, because it's easy to say you're going to hold on to like Jackson Holiday, right?
Buy, big time buy.
Yeah, right. so but I understand it. I understand the reticence and like hoping you can cash in, and maybe you still can get something for him because his name value is still significant. You can certainly sell him to Jeff.
True.
But I also had Zach Veen as a buy right now, for a lot of the reasons that Jeff mentioned. There's no question that his surface stats are atrocious this year. 209 with a 303 on base percentage and a 308 slugging percentage. It's pretty anemic. But what stuck out to me was three things. One, he still stole 22 bases. He's still running. The speed's there, and there's no denying the speed skill. And he has stolen more bases than that when he's been healthier. So I like to see that. Strikeout rate came down too. He had a 21.4% strikeout rate, which was a reduction from the prior year. Still not like spectacular, but that's pretty good for an outfielder. And he coupled that with a walk rate at 11.4%. You get on base, you draw some walks, you don't strike out a lot, and you got that kind of speed. There could be something there. And if you can get him at a price that's low enough, I'm buying. Because if he ends up being a decent hitter in cores, I can take that value. Obviously, his contract is fine in ABL right now, but it really does depend on the acquisition cost. If somebody's like still believing he's like and starts saying he's a top 100 prospect to me, I'm tuning out at that point.
And I think the change in the draft rules where the lotto picks are $3 and the other first rounders are $2, that makes the $5 salary seem less scary.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're going to start seeing shrewder owners start factoring in the change in the draft economics when assessing how to deal with draft picks and also these kind of prospects that we still have on our rosters at $1 or as in this case $5. So we got 2 buys and 1 sell. All right, everybody sticking with their original vote. Yeah. Dave, you sticking with your sell?
I mean, I think if you found an owner that was willing to buy Veen for anything, that's interesting at all, I would sell. But if you can't get anything interesting, just hold him. So I think I would just hold.
All right, fair enough. All right, so we get 2 buys and a hold, but maybe if I get the right deal, a sell. Fair enough. All right, so that's 1 prospect down. So now we're going to go to the pitching side. And we got another guy who was a really big hyped player going into the draft, Jarlin Sassana of the Washington Nationals. A young pitcher who was an international pitcher the year before and was shooting up draft boards as we approached the auction, and was drafted very high in the ABL this year. And I know for a lot of us, we talked about him on the show. I think, Jeff, you and I talked to him about on the podcast. We had him rated pretty high on our board. I can't remember, Dave, if we talked about him, but let's start with you, Dave, since Jeff went first the last time. Where do you have Jarlin Sassana? Buy, sell, or hold?
This kind of goes more just to I am almost hesitant to buy anyone in Washington's system right now because I think we did talk about this last time. Washington has something's
amiss.
Something's weird going on in Washington. I don't exactly know what's going on, but he did take a big step back this year. And I would never buy a teenager pitcher with a over 4.5 walk rate that is struggling and is only in low A. I mean, I don't know why at any point you would want to kind of take that risk because he's probably not top 100 anymore, but I just don't know why you would take that risk. And especially since he does still have name value, I would be selling. There should be an ASP, always sell pitchers. So, I mean, I'm stuck with Andrew Painter, who's kind of,
yeah.
I'm just gonna have to wait till 2025 to see anything from him at this point.
Yeah, that's
so always sell pitchers.
There's Phillies fans in the league. You might be able to sell Painter.
You can be able to sell Painter. Yeah, you can always sell pitchers unless you're Yuri Perez. My boy. All right, so you got to sell on Jarlin Sasana, which I understand totally. He did not have a great year. Maybe took a little hit on his name recognition too, going into 2024. Jeff, where are you on Sasana?
Sure doesn't look good, right? I would have drafted him in the second round. I actually ended up taking Gutierrez, who we're going to talk about later, one pick after Susana, but because Detroit took Susana. But I definitely would have taken Susana if he was there. He's got great size, got a 98 miles per hour fastball. Everything looked good, but it turns out that he can't throw strikes, like Dave said. And he was walking a guy in one guy per inning. None of his secondary has developed at all, from what I could see. He's only 19. There's still time, but like guys like him, it's probably going to be a reliever at best at this point. So the fantasy value is pretty low. He would be a hard sell for me.
Hard sell. All right, not just a sell, a hard sell.
He's kind of taking. I mean, we're all Cardinals fans. I mean, Johan Oviedo took so long to develop, even when he was good in the minors.
Right.
And even now, he's like, he's good when he has his control and when he's able to pinpoint his fastball, which isn't very good.
Right.
Washington has, I don't know how to pronounce it, Andre Lara, who has been a guy for like 3 years, and I kind of see in the same situation as Susana, maybe like a year ahead. But
yeah,
it's just, I don't know why. In 3 years, buy Susana, because then he'll probably be on the doorstep. And I don't know why you would want to hold a developing pitcher for 3 years waiting for him to get things to click.
Right.
That there's so much better use of your roster space.
Maybe in 3 years he's like Yanier Cano from Baltimore or somebody, just a big moose to bring in the late innings. But
all right, so you Jeff, you got him pretty hard profile for the bullpen.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, which I understand. Look, there was some talk about Sasana being a bullpen risk anyway. Given his makeup and his pitches, and that certainly is a potential outcome for him. I have Sasana right now as a hold if I have him on my roster. I think the acquisition cost probably for most people, and certainly an ABL with the pick that was invested in him, you're not going to get that kind of value if you sell him right now.
Right.
So I think it's hard to just jettison him after 1 year. This is his first full taste of ball stateside. He was an A-ball as a 19-year-old, which is advanced for the level. He's young for the level. He obviously really struggled with control. He's got electric stuff. His fastball is pretty amazing from every scouting report that I read. Did not generate the strikeouts that I anticipated he would, which is a red flag. But because he's so young and playing, against older competition, I'm willing to give it one more season to see how it goes. But mostly because I just don't think you're going to get the value that you invested in acquiring Sasana in the first place in ABL. And I have Sasana in other leagues where I got him off the waiver wire.
Yeah.
And in those leagues, I might sell him if I got the right deal. But
all it takes is for one fantasy site to put out one article saying, buy Susana, he was a big time deal, and then you can just sell him.
That's exactly. Yeah. So
someone reads it.
Right. I think, part of what we were talking about heading into the beginning of this discussion was just, where are we in the process of the ABL? And at this time of year, are you getting bang for your buck for the kid? And I just don't think you are. So I would just I wouldn't on the block him. I would just stash him away. He's like a guy I'm not even thinking about right now. He's just going to take up one of my 20 slots. And then, as you said, if he gets hot in the spring or somebody starts writing about him as a great buy low target, generates some interest, then you can think about selling him. So we'll see what John does with him. But if John still has him, does John still hold him?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Right. All right. So we've got sell hard, and hold. Fair enough. All right. So speaking of Cardinals, how about our boy Tink Hence? And since I haven't started yet, I'll start the discussion. This is a kid I'm selling. if I can. I think in the ABL there are a lot of Cardinals owners. That's one thing. Number two, he's gotten a lot of hype within the last year. He played in the futures game. There's been a lot written about the kid. But he's 21 years old and he's in Double A. It's not terrible. Kind of right where you'd want him to be. Didn't strike out a lot of guys. His walk rate was okay. There's always been bullpen risk with him, and there's always been injury risk with him given his frame. And I think for me, he's kind of the quintessential pitcher that is risky but getting a lot of hype. That if I can really cash in on, like this is a kid I would sell, even though it would pain me as a Cardinals fan to do it. I'd pull the trigger and deal him if I had the right pieces in place in return. Dave, what do you think?
I guess it depends. I would still have him pretty squarely among my top 20 pitchers or so that I'm looking at in the minors. Like, here's a question: like, where would you put Tink Hens next to a guy that we're not talking about, but that was like squarely only good this year, Jacob Misiorowski? Like, where would you take him relative to Jacob?
You mean in just a draft? Would I take Hens over?
In a 1-for-1, who would you take?
Tink by a mile to me.
Yeah, I take Tink in that deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think
would you take Tink?
In that situation, I'd probably sell Tink to take Misiorowski, just because. I mean, I think all of us are kind of frustrated with Cardinals pitching development lately. It seems like there needs to kind of be, and there is going to be a reevaluation of what happens in the Cardinals minor league pitching development sector.
I don't know. Some of the pitchers seem to be doing really well. They're just pitching on other teams.
Yeah, I mean, they're great.
Alcantara looked all right last year. He struggled a little
Gallen
bit this year.
Looked great.
Gallen looks okay. Yeah, I mean,
Dormont dominated tonight.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not so sure the Cardinals can't develop pitching. They just really stupid about trading. but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Look, Jack Flaherty hasn't worked out, and is out of town, and obviously, they've lost some guys to injury or off the field stuff as well. Anthony Reyes was a huge disappointment, and obviously Carlos Martinez, tore up his shoulder, and that basically ended him. But yeah, for me, like Hens, I'd want more than that in return if I was selling him at this point, because I think the stuff is there, and he's another guy that can pop. If he gets off to a great start, at the beginning of the year, he's a guy you can probably sell for even more. I don't know. I mean, to me, that proposed trade seems a little light. I don't know, Jeff. Where are you at on Hens?
I'm a hold, leaning towards buy. I'm still high on him. I mean, to me, you mentioned Carlos Martinez, and we got some great years out of Carlos, and he had a similar build to Tink, and
sure.
Even similar kind of arsenal. And I think he's of that mold, and the Cardinals desperately need someone like him. So he'll be in the rotation, barring injury, in a year or two. And
yeah. No, look, believe me, I want Hens to be electric, right. Amazing.
When you look at his year this year, I mean, he was having a great year the first half in High A, and they promoted him to Double A, and then he's had some struggles, right? I mean, that's common. That's common for anybody, so it's hard to hold that against him too much. And but his last few starts were a lot better, and it's also worth noting that this is the most innings he's ever pitched.
That's fair.
The Cardinals have been kind of babying this kid, and they've seen that he has great stuff, and they've been babying him a little bit. But I mean, he's their best pitching prospect by miles and miles to me. So
no doubt about that.
Right. No so I mean, I do have him on two different teams, and I'm not going to trade him, like, probably for anybody.
Right. For me, again, it's like all the, what you could get for him, it would have to be the right deal. I'm not just giving it away.
I'd trade him for one of the guys we're going to talk about later, but that's about it from a pitching prospect standpoint.
Right. So did you vote buy, sell, hold on Tink?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I think my general consensus was if you two guys would take Tink over Mizurowski, that would make me a sell, because that would be a good enough deal for me to pull the trigger. I'd rather take a guy in a pitching farm, I would call it, with just like lights out stuff versus Tink, who kind of falls in the realm of still building up innings, good stuff, but questionable execution so far, and a kind of a maligned pitching org. So
Right.
I think among us three, I'm probably the most concerned with what organization a player's in versus what we see just like on the stats.
Yeah, no, this is the second time you've mentioned it, and it's a fair, criticism of some of these prospects. It does factor in, for example, in the ABL prospect handbook that I put together. That's one of the factors I did consider. One could question whether I gave it enough weight. Maybe it should maybe more weighted than it was in that evaluation process. And the Washington Nationals that you brought up before is a good example. We're going to have another national on this list in a little bit. They've really struggled to develop minor league players. But I do wonder, for the reasons I stated, whether the Cardinals on the whole can be dinged for their pitching development, because I do think they have developed some guys. They've just gotten rid of them. So the jury's still out for me on that. But I do generally agree with the principle that the organization matters. And I was not happy to see Sasana traded from the Padres to the Nationals. In the same sense that I wasn't happy to see, Mackenzie Gore dealt to the Nationals either. They've really has struggled to develop, young players and keep them healthy, frankly. All right. So the next guy on the list is one Jack Leiter of the Texas Rangers, a guy who, when he came out of Vanderbilt, was like drafted in the top 10 by a lot of owners. So really high acquisition cost for Jack Leiter in most fantasy leagues. And in ABL, he was drafted quite high too. I think he was like the number 2 overall pick in the ABL or something like that. Very high up there. So Jeff, why don't we start with you, since it's back to your turn, so to speak. Where are you on Jack Leiter and the bloodlines that go with him?
I have him as a hold because of how much his star has fallen. Right? I mean, he was drafted like expected to be a fast track to the majors, without a doubt, and he's just walked too many guys, and his fastball's been too hittable. He's given up a ton of hard contact. But he's still striking dudes out. There's no doubt that, and I think he would in the majors too. But he'd get hit hard too, and there's still some development needed. I still think he'll be in the majors sooner than later. And probably next season. And I like to look at their season kind of and see how it went, see if there were like streaks of hotness and coldness. And Leiter was getting just hammered this summer, and he ended up taking a 2-month break in July and August. And he came back after that and had 4 starts that were really good. So it's possible that he was hurt or he was overworked, or maybe he just like worked with coaching and figured something out. But I do have hope that he can get back on track. And I think you can buy him at a cost right now where the investment would probably be worth it, because in a points league like APL, he still has the potential to be a horse that can throw 200 innings. I still think he has that in him, and that's invaluable if you could get that for just a few bucks on a long-term contract. And there's still a decent shot he ends up being that way in spite of his struggles, in my opinion.
All right, so I'll make a pizza bet with you right now, Jeff.
Yeah.
I bet you that he never throws 200 innings in a single season.
Can I take that on every single
yeah.
pitching prospect ever? I don't know. I mean, the days of the 200 inning pitcher are basically gone. How many guys hit it this year? Like 10.
Yeah, I was just reacting to that one comment. I don't think he's
been
200 innings. But
how many did Leiter throw in college? You know, and he was a horse down there.
yeah, look, I think there's a big difference between Major League Baseball and Vanderbilt.
Right.
You know, and I mean, look, you know, I'll go next on Jack. So you're a hold, although it does sound also, Jeff, in fairness, that you might buy him in the right circumstance.
I would if the cost was, you know, like a 100, 150-ish pick, which might be where he's settling right now. You know, I mean, like rated prospect between 100 and 150. I would trade that for Leiter.
All right. So, all right, you're, you know, a buy hold guy on Leiter. I'm a sell on Jack. I've never been high on Jack Leiter. He's too small for me for a pitcher, 6 feet for a starting pitcher, 205. There have been durability questions about him. There were durability questions about him going into this draft. And they've proven prescient. He's had a really hard time staying on the field. He's a small pitcher. There's real bullpen risk for this kid. I think he might actually profile as a good reliever, given his fastball and his ability to actually pitch. But I have real concerns that he's like never going to be a frontline starter at this point. And I think there's still enough shine on that star, as evinced by kind of the things you were saying, Jeff. You know, you're a shrewd owner, and like you're, you know, still interested in buying in. Like Jack's a guy I think I can sell and still get something for. And I think there's a real risk that his stock is going to fall even further as we go into 2024. So, you know, in ABL, he's 23s in AAA. I think you can sell his proximity. You might actually be able to get a pretty good piece for him right now in ABL. I know, Dave, where are you on him?
I mean, like, I kind of want to bring up a little bit of a narrative here. If you took Jack Leiter, you were probably considering Henry Davis. You were probably considering Marcelo Meyer, Colton Cowser, Jordan Lawler, maybe Jackson Jobe. Although him being a pitcher, you probably
don't forget Khalil Watson.
Yeah, Khalil Watson too. Okay, sure, you got me there. But assuming you're not taking the second best pitcher, if you're going to take a pitcher at all with that level of a pick where Leiter's available, you're probably disappointed already. You probably already sold in many cases. And if you did sell, you sold it to a guy who still believes in Leiter despite his this is arguably an improvement over last year, right?
Yeah.
And so whoever bought Leiter from whoever sold him after just feeling like they wasted their, you know, top pick for a team that was bad, is probably holding on to him at this point. Like, this is nothing for a team that buys Leiter after last year. So I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that pitcher from whoever that crazy person is. But
so you're not buying. So, but what do you think?
I'm not buying. I'm not selling. I'm not holding, because that is like so far away from my realm that I'm not touching.
So you're just cutting him.
Yeah.
He's on your roster. What are you going to do?
Okay. Let's say he's on my roster. Yeah, I would probably, if tempted, I could cut him. In a 20-man roster, I could be tempted to cut Leiter.
Now look, I mean, all right, in all seriousness, you're going to be able to get something for Jack Leiter. I mean,
Jeff sure, but like, what I would want for Jack Leiter, if it just wasn't good enough, and there was a guy on the waiver wire that like was just there, just like a pop-up guy, I could totally be tempted to just take a pop-up guy.
Right. I'm going to classify that as like hard sell.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I'm selling to the waiver wire.
There you go. Wow.
If tempted, yeah.
That's quite a spectrum of opinion.
That's not the only player that I would do this to on this list.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing about the others. All right. Well, that's good. This is part of the interesting thing to me about this whole discussion. You got 3 good owners on it, and you have like 3 completely divergent views on Jack Leiter. So, you know, we'll see what who has him. Is it Sam who has Jack Leiter?
It's Boston. So
Boston. They drafted him. I thought they traded him.
him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we'll see what he wants to do.
I mean, he's still striking out 12 per 9, and
yeah.
That's not nothing at a high level in AA and AAA. So.
Yeah. No, it's not nothing. You know, we'll see if he pitches 50 innings. So, you know, all right, let's talk about the next guy. Another dude, Robert Hassel, who was drafted very high in leagues. A lot of hype for him going into his draft year in fantasy. Obviously, has struggled mightily, but is at AAA at this point. And as Dave has already pointed out, he's in the national system, which is something to note. So, Dave, we'll start with you with Robert Hassel.
I would have already dropped Hassel by now. I would have. This is the guy who I don't know what you're looking for at this point. There's basically like no good way to put any of his experience so far since he has been traded. And I mean, I don't know what you're trying to hope for, that he becomes a player that he was in the very low minors, in the upper minors. And even when he was in the low minors, there were like little footnotes like, oh, well, the exit velocity isn't quite there yet, but he's hitting everything. And
Right.
Now he's not hitting, and the exit velocity still isn't there. So I don't know what you're trying to hope for. You may as well just like pick up any player and hope for the same thing. It's probably similar bet. So hard sell to the waiver wire.
Hard sell to the waiver wire. I like it.
Yeah.
Jeff, what about you?
I mean, to me, this guy is a cautionary tale, Steve, of why scout rankings aren't everything. Because they had this dude as like, a 60. I've even seen higher than 60 hit tool. And he always struck out all the time. Like in professional ball, it's like 31.6% this year in AA. He's the worst hitter on his team. He's, I never understood why this guy was so high on prospect list. I thought it was weird. He didn't have any power. He was swinging a noodle out there. And I didn't know why it was a big part of the Soto deal either. I had no idea why Washington valued him.
Because they're Washington, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I would have no interest in acquiring him whatsoever. So he'd be a sell for me.
All right, a sell. So interesting. I'm just curious, because you brought up scouting reports, where Baseball America had him going into this.
They had him 57 even before this year.
And not rankings. I'm talking about actually tools. So they had his power to 45.
Right.
So below average power.
But hit tool is 60. That is proven to be very wrong.
Yeah.
I also don't think Baseball America will like look at exit velocity when they're assigning power, which to me is, if you're going to assign a power tool, wouldn't it be like just entirely based off science? Like,
no, they take the exit velocity into consideration in their secondary scouting reports. So when you get the ones coming out of college or coming out of high school, I don't think the metrics are consistent enough in terms of where you get the data for them to factor in as much. I could be speaking out of turn. Maybe they're doing stuff I don't know about, but I usually see their scouting reports start to pick up exit velocity, usually, after the full season of the minors. So, that power rating, for example, of 45, right?
Right.
I think that scouting
That's
grade.
Though. He's not a 40.
Yeah, he could be lower than that. I mean, but that they already had downgraded him. I'm, for Hassel at this point, it's really an awful predicament to me, right? He's been so bad, and such a disappointment. I was never high on him coming into the draft when he came out, principally because I don't like outfielders who don't have power, and don't have blazing speed. He's got like decent speed, but not like great speed. So like, what are you really buying? Like empty batting average, maybe. And he had a 31, almost a 32% strikeout rate this year.
Brutal.
It's brutal. And he also, when he does make contact, he's hitting it on the ground. He's got like a 50+% ground ball rate. Coupled with like very meager ISO. He does walk a little bit. Like he's got a serviceable 10.9% walk rate, but he's just been terrible. But if you're the poor dude who like has him, like, what can you possibly get if you're selling? You're not going to get anything real for him. I mean, I suppose if you could get like a 3rd round draft pick, you take it. But I would be given
it. Tom has him. It looks like the White Sox, and so I mean he might get a third round for him if he tries. You know?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Somebody
I sent Tom I sent Harry White Sox Hassel because I had Hassel for like 2 seconds, and then moved him for Bo Bichette with
with others.
the other guys, especially Evan Carter,
Yeah.
who I kind of had similar concerns about as Hassel, but it kind of just looks like Carter's hitting everything. So
Right.
Well, Evan Carter is actually a guy I was going to have on this list, but then he debuted.
Right. And he's been killing it at the major.
Yeah, if he hadn't debuted, I would have had him on this list. So all the players we're talking about have not debuted in the majors yet.
I watched the Rangers game, and he looked like the best player on the field. I mean, he really did.
He's been hot right now, and I think I think your concerns, Dave, are valid concerns. There is a question of whether he's going to hit for enough power.
Let me preface this. Before I moved Carter in this league, I had him in 100% of my 3 30-teamers. So I'm a pretty big fan of Carter. I just had concerns, and I do think you could probably sell Carter for like a king's ransom right now and get more than what he's probably going to be worth next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had conversations about Carter with a lot of owners over the past year, not always on the podcast, but just generally, and people are really stoked for him coming up. And I think there is a fair question of whether he's ever going to hit for enough power to warrant the hype that he's getting right now. I think he's a good ball player. I think he can steal bases, and if he gets on base in an OPS league or an OBP league, he's got extra value because he walks. And he's going to be a guy who hits at the top of the lineup eventually. I know he's hitting low in the Rangers order, but right now. But I just don't know whether there's enough pop there in the outfield long term to warrant the kind of hype he's getting. I think he's a good ball player, and if I had him, I wouldn't be selling him unless I got really paid. But I'd be open to it. I think Tom has him, Evan Carter too. If I'm the White Sox roster.
Well, Harry didn't do anything after those trades, so yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the acquisition of Hassel from you, Dave, by Harry is like kind of an example of people just trading off prospect lists to me, right? Without really thinking about it too much. And I don't know why you'd want Evan Carter and Robert Hassel in your system.
Hassel's still ranked. I see him 129 on one list. And...
Right. Well, that's why these ranking systems, I just can't stand them. There's a real stickiness to them that they just won't let go.
Right.
And so how long is it going to take before he's outside the top 250?
There's really no reason why for players that exhibit extreme struggle, why there should be a stickiness there.
I agree.
I mean, at that point, it's just you're weighting your new list off of whatever list you had last time because you're scared of moving X player down too far. But prospects, especially in this age, it can happen in an instant where some guy just goes in the cage and figures something out and goes out the next week and hits the hot sheet. And at that point, he's a guy, you have to be on him. And I don't know why you're on a guy like Robert Hassel, who's been struggling all year, has no hope in sight, and putting him over whoever X new guy is just because, well, I had him there before.
Yeah, I can think of probably 200 or 300 prospects I'd rather have over Robert Hassel right now.
500.
Right, but whatever the number is, right? I mean, so I didn't ultimately say what my vote was on him, but I would be either a hold if I can't get anything for him and I don't find anything I like off of the waiver wire more than him, or a sell for a draft pick at this point, or he's a guy you throw into a deal, to get the deal done. What about Robert Hassel? What if I give him? Oh, I'll take a shot on him, throw him in, right? But yeah, I mean. He's also one of these dudes that I might hold going into the draft and then cut him. Yeah. It's seeing I bet you that I like better. Right. I mean, and knowing me, I'd probably take some J15 and cut Robert Hassel, over him. I mean, whomever it is. Right. All right. So much for the Washington Nationals. All right. So here's a guy, one of my boys that I like a lot. Yiddy Cape. And I'll start with him since I think it's my turn in the rotation here. But Cape is an interesting prospect to me because right now it's all projection for him rather than performance. So he's a little bit older than I'd like for him at his level. He's high A and he's 21. He didn't strike out a lot. It's only about 19%, but he didn't walk. It's only about 3.4%. And his isolated power is kind of crappy. So he hasn't really done anything. But he's 6'3", 175, and he's 19. He's 21, right? He's still got room to grow. And I'm probably a hold on him unless I can just find something I like better, like in the draft. If I had if I was forced to make a move, I'd probably cut him, or trade him for a pick. But I'm probably a hold just to see what happens in a full season at high A. But I'm not as enthused as I was about him going into the draft last year, and I think a lot of owners are. But he's definitely a guy who started getting a lot of hype around this draft season, beginning of the draft season last year. Dave, where are you on him?
Well, I was going to ask, does your answer change if scrolling across the bottom it said Yiddy Cape or however, second base Marlins? Does your answer change then?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that it does, only because I'm not convinced that he's ever going to reach the majors at this point. Right?
Because he played like 75% second base this year.
Yeah,
He was barely at shortstop.
Yeah, it's going to change. It's going to change as we go into next season. That's fair. I'm not really too concerned. I mean, if he had actually done something, and it was just a question about having enough power, and he had hit a little bit, I thought he could actually play second base on an everyday basis. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm buying. But I don't know. I mean, the best thing I can say about him is he's 6'3", 175, and he only struck out 19%. Those aren't bad things. I don't know. But where are you, Dave?
Weirdly, I'd probably buy, just for the same reason. He's very projectable. Mm-hmm. He is probably sticking in the infield. Maybe he's not shortstop, but he's kind of played all over down there. And I just I'm okay. Maybe I'm in between a buy and a hold, where I do have him in one league, and I'm just kind of not super jumping on the gun to drop him or sell him, just because
right.
there is. I've been burned by really projectable guys, especially international guys, that just turn it around. I spent way back 8 years ago. I spent pretty good draft capital on taking Eloy when he first came over. He was a big time prospect, and then he kind of sucked pretty bad his first year. And I'm like, okay, well, he's 18 and a million years away. And then the next year he was crushing it. So
yeah,
I would probably do a light buy or just hold and see what comes out of spring training in April. And if he's still sucking through April, then I would just cut.
All
right, fair enough. Jeff, where are you?
I cut him already on 2 teams. I mean, he had one 30-game hot streak in the Florida Complex League, and he's pretty much sucked other than that. So I don't really have any interest whatsoever.
All right, so sell cut for Jeff.
Yes.
All right, fair enough. I like that assessment. He pretty much just sucked everywhere else. All right, good enough. All right, let's talk about another draft darling, DePaula, Josu DePaula of the Dodgers. So I know that Jeff, this is a guy you and I kibitz about, at least, in DMs, but where are you on him now?
I'd still buy him for sure. His swing is one of the prettiest that you'll see. His YouTube videos are just fun to watch. His pretty left-handed swing. And yeah, I mean, he's obviously, he's a tall kid. He's projectable, but the concerns this year and why he's on this list, because he didn't hit homers this year like everyone expected him to, right?
Yep.
He has a power swing, and people expected him to, show that, and he hit 2 homers all season, so that's not great. But he is only 18. Hit the weight room a little bit, come back, you'll probably hit a few more. I think that with all of his tools, and he did put up a decent OPS, and especially the last month, he really picked it up. Even without the homer, so he was hitting extra base hits, hitting a lot of doubles. But to me, if he comes back next year and shows more power than he did this year, which I think most people would expect, that this kid's like prospect status is going to be on a rocket ship, and he could easily be in the top 25. And that's the kind of guy that you want to chase when you're prospecting. In my mind, is people that are, even if they have some hype like he does, there's kind of some struggles this year in his first taste of professional ball. And a kid like that, though, if he picks it up, he's absolutely going to be on a rocket ship. So I'm buying.
All right, got it. What about you, Dave?
I think it's a pretty solid buy. The problem is whoever has the guy is probably not selling for. Whoever has Yosue is probably holding them as a top 50 prospect. And if I had to give up, let's say, just on my team, if I had to move like Basalo to try to get Yosue De Paula, I would not do that. And same goes for like other guys. Looking at the top 50 lists right now.
Somebody has a cat, which I approve of.
Yeah, that's Mr. Darcy. He is wanting to go in the garage, and he's never been in the garage, so
that's not happening.
Yeah, like Dalton Rushing, I would not move, and Noel V. Marte, maybe. Yanquiel Fernandez, maybe.
You would move Marte for him. Come on.
Yeah.
What is Marte's contract in ABL?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not looking at anyone's contract in ABL. I'm just thinking about the player themselves.
Yeah.
But
all right, so you're
what's DePaula's contract right now?
I'm sure he's $1.
It's $1. He's on the Twins, so it's gonna be hard to get him. Tyler holds his guys pretty tight.
Yeah, that's gonna be. That's gonna be impossible. You're gonna have to pay top 40 guy to get him from Tyler. Like, sure, try. But
I'm gonna trade him. I'll trade him Bailey Ober for him. He's hot for Ober.
Yeah.
All right, so you're a buy, but you can't figure out a guy you're going to be able to buy him from,
or a guy to buy with, just because I think it's just going to be like still so expensive for pretty much any player. Well, no, I am a buy, but it's an expensive buy. But if someone is like reasonable and is like doing like, oh, he's like really far away, he's like maybe like back end top 100 guy right now, I would do that price. But if you start getting in, like, for guys near the majors that are pretty good specs, I don't know.
All right, so you want to say something, Jeff?
I was gonna say I have Carlos Jorge and ABL, and they're ranked very similar, and I would trade him for DePaula for sure, given the opportunity.
Okay, so I am a sell on DePaula, and I'll tell you why. It's exactly what you guys just said. There's enough interest in this kid still after like a year where he didn't hit any home runs. And he's an outfielder in the Dodgers organization. You can always sell Dodger prospects. I do have some concerns whether, when he gets to the point where he's at the majors, whether the Dodgers block him because they're always trying to compete and win, and they have a veteran in the outfield. We've seen some of the Dodger hitting prospects not pan out despite good performances in the minor leagues. Both of you guys are still bullish on him. You guys both are successful loaders in ABL. I think if I on the block this kid, I could get paid and probably even get a major league player for him at this point.
That is kind of what we're saying. I guess, buy, sell, hold. It's all relative, of course, but I think there's so much interest in DePaula, but in my mind, it's kind of valid. So
Oh no, yeah, I think he's a good prospect.
yeah,
I do wonder whether, given your need to compete now, right? And if you can get a major league player for him, put him in a deal that gets you a major league starter, you know, are you really not going to sell him at this point?
Steve,
And
your take on this doesn't really fit your MO. He's an 18-year-old kid
I
with
know, I know, I would sell him.
tool,
Look how excited you guys are about him. I'm going to sell
everything
him.
you want.
I had him to sell on my list. I was like, well, this kid's still getting so much hype. He didn't hit any home runs.
Yeah.
Just like, and look, if he is a middle infielder, I wouldn't be as concerned about the home runs. And Jeff, maybe he does hit home runs. Maybe it comes.
Right.
And he is only 18.
I think it will come.
Yeah, it probably will. It probably will. And he didn't strike out a lot. He's like, he's got good metrics. There's Mr. Darcy. I love it. My cat's over here too. Very cute. But I'm selling because I think I can actually get something for him right now. It's something meaningful. If I wasn't able to, I would hold him.
Yeah.
And I frankly don't think you can buy him right now because the price is too high. For the reasons you guys are saying. I mean, you both like him. That's what you're really saying.
Yeah.
But you're not willing to really pay for him, right? So I wouldn't be able to sell him to either of you. But
I'm just too. I'm too safe. I'm always just too safe. That's
I hear
my
you.
thing. So I wouldn't be the one to buy.
No,
but I wouldn't judge anyone that did buy because I think, unless the price is crazy.
All right. So let's talk about another guy who Jeff actually sold this past year, Anthony Gutierrez of the Texas Rangers. And Jeff, we'll start with you since you sold him after drafting him fairly high.
I did. I have him as a hold personally, and he's very similar use case to DePaula in a lot of ways, right? His stats are pretty similar. He similarly did not hit power that he was projected to hit. He's the same age. But I think his price is lower than DePaula's for sure. Like his stars faded a little bit, and I'm not really sure why. Why DePaula's kind of stayed at the level that the hype level that he was beginning of the season, and Gutierrez kind of fell off. The reason why I was so high on him before the season is there was this kind of narrative, and I don't know how true it was. I probably bought into some Twitter nonsense that this scrawny little kid had put on a bunch of muscle and was crushing balls in batting practice and all this. And maybe that was true. I don't know. I saw some recent videos. He still looked pretty scrawny to me.
Right. Well, I mean, what is he? 6'3", 180?
Right.
I think he's lean, right? I mean, he's still 6'3", and he's still 180, which is like more than highway. But he's a big kid. And we talked about Capé and being projectable. This kid is projectable.
Right.
At 6'3", 180. I'm a buy on this kid right now. And the difference to me between DePaula and Gutierrez is that Gutierrez, I think you can still buy for a reasonable price, as you were saying, Jeff.
Yeah.
He also has speed, which is not really in DePaula's profile. Kid stole 30 bases this year.
Right.
And it's consistent with his skill ratings. He didn't strike out a ton. He's got a 22% strikeout rate, which is solid for an outfielder. I think you can get this kid for decent value. I'd definitely bring him in. He fits my profile, Jeff.
Yeah.
He's young power speed guy. I'll take him.
And then DePaula's still 21 also. He's not a slouch, but
no, but I don't think, if my recollection is that his speed scouting is not like that high.
Right.
And minor league stolen bases can be a little bit tricky to value. So that's the distinction I was making, that he had the scouting and the numbers.
I think Gutierrez might have fallen off some list entirely, so it wouldn't surprise me. So I mean, I think you could get him in some places for a third or fourth round pick, which I would certainly do.
Yeah. What about you, Dave?
Probably hold. I mean, all these international guys that struggle after their first year stateside, you spent the draft capital to get these guys, which already, like, maybe that's the better question. Like, do you really, like, what is like the value you normally get from these picks? just like on average. Like there is the chance they explode. Like a player on the Tampa Bay Rays who shall not be named now.
Right.
But a
Well,
lot
he
of
may
times,
be named in an indictment.
yeah, he will be named there. But like a lot of times you're just like holding forever. They're a million years away. So my philosophy is always just, unless I'm really excited about the guy, I'll just take the high A and up players. But where are you guys at on like Yasser Mercedes, for example, who also was really hyped and very projectable coming in, and also like pretty much sucked on this year? Like, are you holding him for another year? Because I think if you're whatever you're doing for like Cape and Mercedes, you're also doing for Gutierrez, because they're all the same.
I don't know. I mean,
We have not enough information about them.
I view Gutierrez as a little bit different than Cape for me. That's why I had different ratings on them in terms of buy or sell. I mean, Cape was the guy I'm willing to get rid of, and Gutierrez is the guy I'm interested in acquiring. But I take your broader point, which is that some of these guys, once they struggle in their first year, particularly international guys, there's a cost of holding them in terms of giving up a roster spot for them in ABL. And that's nothing, particularly with the draft coming up. So, I have a ton of international guys on my roster. And, I'll have some tough decisions on some of them, because some of them, played and got hurt, for example, and didn't have a full season. So what do I do with them? A guy like I really like on my roster is Braylon Guerrero, the Tampa Bay system. Projects as a big power hitter, but he hurt his wrist and basically got shut down. So the numbers he put up are kind of, affected by the wrist injury. Then he got shut down, and like,
I feel like a guy like that, like if you cut him, he'll probably just stay out there on the
maybe,
if he signs of life, you can pick him up later, most likely.
Yeah, possibly. But so those kind of decisions to me like are actually the tougher ones, because like I actually like this kid, and the scouting reports on him are really good, but he just didn't have, basically lost a year.
Right.
And it's very frustrating. These other guys who have struggled, like they still get enough hype, Gutierrez and Cape, that if you cut them, like somebody's gonna pick them up. Yeah. So you can trade them for a pick, and that's might be what I'd be doing with these guys, trading for draft picks to restock and take another shot at the barrel. But Gutierrez is a little bit different to me, because I actually kind of still like him. But so you're like, you're not buying, Dave. You're definitely like,
no. I would just hold, and I think this goes back to probably like the core belief of my approach to all of this is just that there's someone better on the waiver wire. I mean, or if there's not someone better, there's enough players who are almost as good that are always there,
right,
that are always coming up. Like, why do you want to? One of the toughest decisions I routinely have is that I've kind of gotten better at by just detaching myself. Is like, how long do I want to hold a roster spot on this guy who is just sucking so bad? I'd rather just like, there's 3 players on the BA hot sheet that was just released that are on the waiver wire right now, and say like Robert Hassel is the 20th best guy in my system. Am I really like trying to find a trade really quick just to like clear up a spot so I can get this guy who I think is probably going to be picked up tomorrow?
Yep.
And like, if I can't, so it's just like, a lot of times if the best deal I'm going to get is like a 4th round pick or like a couple dollars a fab, go nuts. Just grab him in the waiver wire when I drop him. It's such marginal cost to me. I'd rather have the guy I want.
I understand that. I get it. And look, I've made decisions like that too in the ABL, and cutting guys that I was holding on to because I wanted to see what they would do. And they're not Robert Hassel types, who came at a high acquisition cost. But I spent a lot of my time churning minor league players on the wire, because the cost is so de minimis that I'm just like, oh, I'll get another one. But I think cutting a guy like Castle is a harder decision. But it may be one you're prepared to make now.
Yeah.
I mean, for the reasons we discussed.
I think it's a healthy approach to, as soon as a player leaves your team, you never think about them again, ever. Because otherwise you're just going to be sweating at
right, the FOMO
9 a.m. while you're trying to decide, do I want to drop this guy and grab the guy on the waiver wire like right now?
No, I think part of being a good prospector is having cold-blooded conviction, and being able to move on. So let's move on to our next guy, who had a great season, in Chase Hampton of the Yankees. And let's actually start this time with you, Dave, on Chase.
Yeah, I'm not too in the know on, I guess, why Chase Hampton is included with the rest of these guys, because he was kind of a pop-up guy this year, and I haven't followed him too much. So, what is the wart that I'm missing for Hampton?
So, for me, Chase Hampton's an interesting guy, and I wanted to include one of these like breakout darlings on this list, and Chase is that guy. He was not a highly touted prospect coming into the season, and certainly not coming into drafts. So he's a guy that a lot of owners have plucked off waiver wires across fantasy baseball, and based on his strikeout numbers, right, which have been good. They've been very good, and his walk rate's been also nice. The Yankees do not exactly have a great history of developing pitching prospects. The last guy they really developed was Andy Pettit, who was very good.
You can count Severino. He was great for a while.
Yeah, I mean, the injuries have killed Sev, in fairness. But there's a question that I've read in some scouting reports of whether this kid's the real deal or not. And I'm very interested to see what the scouting reports say about him coming into next season, because they get re-released in the winter, the new scouting reports. So I'm like, for me, Chase Hampton is a hold. He's not a guy I'm going to go out to chase, no pun intended. And I'm not prepared to sell him because he did well. Although I think you could get paid a pretty penny for him right now. He's in Double-A, reasonably close to the majors. You sell him to a Yankee fan, you probably get overpaid for him. But I'm just kind of like waiting to see what he really is. But what are your thoughts, Dave? I asked you. I kind of jumped the gun and told you what my views were on him. But what are your thoughts?
No, that's good to know, because I was just making sure that the wart was basically like, he's a pop-up guy and we don't really know a lot about him, because I think I've made it clear that doesn't bother me at all. So I would just, he was on my radar. I don't remember who got him, but he came up pretty quick. And there's so many guys that I'm looking at that are coming up pretty quick, and I'll just churn through them, and 80% of them are nothing, so I just drop them. But Hampton was one of the ones I missed that did become a guy. And who got him?
I think Josh.
He's on Josh's
that
team.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that just makes a lot of sense, because it feels like half the time I am like looking at a guy and it doesn't go to me. It went to Josh. So that's why if I'm really excited about a guy, I'll put $2 fab and just really ensure that I get him. But so yeah, I would never buy a pitching prospect, but I would hold Hampton if you did get him.
Yeah,
I have him as a hold as well. Jeff, where are you on him?
I have him as hold, but leaning towards buy rather than sell. I definitely wouldn't sell him. I mean, I loved what he showed this year. I mean, in high A especially, striking out almost 15 guys per nine. I mean, that's absolutely elite. And dropped off a bit in Double-A, but he was still very good. And if he comes back this year and starts the season in Double-A or Triple-A and shows similar, right, he's going to be one of the top pitching prospects in the game.
Yeah, see, it was interesting. The high A numbers, he was old for the level.
Yeah, it's true.
And now he's kind of where he should be. So you saw the drop off, but it wasn't like so steep that I was worried about it.
Right. Agreed.
Right.
didn't struggle the way that Tink did when he got
No.
developed.
I know Tink is a little young for his level, but not young.
Right.
There's the age. There's a 1 year difference between their ages.
Right.
So all right. So we all have him as a hold, which I think makes sense. I think that makes sense. But I'm cautiously waiting to see what he does in terms of moving him to the buy column. Plus, I think you're going to end up having to pay through the nose for him right now if you try to buy him. All right. So another guy I thought was really interesting this year is a darling heading into last year's drafts and prospect rankings. Is Ricky Tiedemann of the Blue Jays, who obviously struggled with injury this year, came back and put up electric numbers in terms of strikeouts. Also put up electric numbers in terms of walks. But I'm interested to where each of you guys are on Ricky. Jeff, we'll start with you.
I have him as a hold on my spreadsheet here. I did sell him in LORJ this year for Nolan Gorman, a first, and Blake Tidwell, and I don't regret that. I think that was the right move for my team because Gorman's proven that he can hit for power in the majors, and that's. But Ricky he's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 pitching prospects. He's got incredible stuff. He's got great size. He's 6'4", 220. I mean, he's got everything you look for to be a front of rotation guy. But he hasn't had his Tommy John yet. So.
Right. Well, and he struggled with injury. Right?
He did. I mean, but I mean, like if you're not scared of, I mean, either unless you're one of those guys that's just like all pitching prospects, sell them. It's like you never know; they're going to come out of nowhere. Who knows?
Right.
If you believe in pitching prospects at all, you have to believe in this kid. And in a 30-teamer, I was pretty pissed off when he got traded to Duke. To be honest, that trade did not make me happy in ABL, just because I thought that that trade was pretty lopsided personally when it went down, and I think he's a very valuable asset in a 30-teamer like that because he is kind of like a true projectable ace.
Yeah, no, he definitely has the skill set and the size to be an ace. Dave, where are you on him?
I would probably buy, just in the sense that from other 30-team owners I've talked to, everyone is just saying like, oh, well, 10 step, he's already shown that he's going to get injured. Why buy him? But this like contradicts everything that I've said. And sometimes it is just like, yeah, I mean, some prospects do that. Sometimes it is just like a general vibe that I get from the community that I'm in. It feels like everyone is currently saying like, oh yeah, he's really good, but he's going to get hurt and he's just not going to pitch. And I'm not necessarily buying that so much. Like, I bet he gives you like 250 really good innings before he needs TJ. And like, at that point, I'd really take that at his price. So I also think he probably has the best arsenal in the minor leagues of any pitcher, just because he has 3+ pitches and strikes out 1 million guys every time he goes out there. So
he does. He's fun.
Yeah.
All right. So you're buying a pitching prospect.
I am buying if my suspicion is correct that Tiedemann would be made available by whoever owns him, because whoever
in our league it's Duke, and he's not making him available for anything. Okay. So, but the hypothetical owner, you might be able to buy him from. All right. So let me play devil's advocate on Ricky, because I'd be looking to sell him going into this season, and I would be waiting until he pitches in the Arizona Fall League to do it. Because if he lights up the Arizona Fall League or does reasonably well there, I think you can get really paid for him. So I would definitely be open to selling him.
We haven't really talked about the Arizona Fall League at all, but that does play a big part, and it's basically the only news we're gonna get from now until January for pretty much any prospect. So Arizona Fall League is always so important for determining value.
It'll turn the hype train for some guys. Eduard Julian took off last year.
Jackson Merrill was huge value after the AFL last year.
So I'd be looking for that bump, and if you get the bump, like I'd really consider moving him. And part of the reasoning is that he hasn't shown he's struggled with injury, and if I couldn't get real value from him, I'd hold him.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely worth exploring for Ricky right now. He's at AAA. He's 21. He's like really been pushed by the Blue Jays aggressively through the minors. Doesn't have a lot of innings on that arm yet, and is still struggling with health. Like
I think he starts the year in the rotation next year for.
He could, which is definitely what I would tell somebody who's trying to buy him from me.
Yeah.
I mean, but these are all reasons. It's the same kind of thinking I had on DePaula. Like, listen to you guys, you're excited about Ricky Tiedemann, right? I'm sure if I put him on the block, there'd be like a lot of offers for him.
Yeah. If Ricky Tiedemann were on the block, I would put in an offer.
Yeah. So I mean, look, you could create a bidding frenzy for him, and you might actually get something really good for him. Definitely worth exploring to me. But I wouldn't just give him away. I'm not like that scared of the injuries, but it's enough of a red flag for me to say like I'm willing to move this guy. For me. All right, so that's the list I gave you guys. All right, those are the 10 prospects, and we didn't have consensus on any single one, with the exception maybe of Robert Hassel, which we basically all almost Mortarberg. It was like sell. I had him as a hold only because like the investment you made on him to see if he can do anything to make him tradable into the offseason, but he definitely could sell him or even cut him. But let's talk about a player that's near and dear to our hearts that was not on the list and who actually debuted for a few minutes we have left, which is one Mason Wynn of the St. Louis Cardinals, who Jeff boldly predicted at the beginning of the season was going to be better than Ozzie Smith.
The next Ozzie Smith.
The next Ozzie Smith, right? The next Ozzie Smith. I stand corrected. So, Jeff, we'll start with you, since I know you're a huge Mason fan. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? Because he's obviously struggled terribly, at the plate. The kid can field.
Yeah,
there's no question he's a slick fielder, and probably if he can stay in the order, it's going to win some Gold Gloves. But what's your thought on him?
I mean, I was disappointed in how his debut went, but I mean that's true for a lot of prospects. Like, a lot of the Orioles guys that came up were pretty terrible. There's a lot of prospects that came up this year that didn't hit. It's kind of it's not that unusual. So I was disappointed, but I'm not really discouraged. I think he'll be the Cardinals starting shortstop for most of next year. I mean, unless if he struggles the same way by May or June, they probably got to try something else.
Right.
And give him some time down in AAA to find a swing again. But he will get every chance to own that job, and his bat will come around. He was hit for reasonable power in the minor leagues, and that just didn't show up in the majors. And I think it will. I mean, to me, it's a buying opportunity, really, because I imagine in some leagues, some people saw his debut. I mean, Joe has him in ABL. Joe's a Cardinals guy too. He's not going to trade him. But in other leagues, people are going to see his debut and be pretty disappointed, and you might be able to get him for pretty cheap. And I would do that if it was available.
Yeah. Well, Dave, what about you?
It's a buying opportunity. But yeah, we have too many Cardinal fans in this league, so
that's why I'm selling tin cans.
I'm just glad I got Nootbaar. So after that, I don't.
Nootbaar's your guy. That's right. Yeah. I was going to broker that Ethan Salas for a Nootbaar trade. Wasn't able to bridge that for you. I'm sorry. Look, I think Wynn's a buying opportunity, but I will say that I've had concerns about his power, even though he did put up decent numbers, as Jeff said, this year in the minors. And they've kind of like shown themselves a little bit in the major league level. I think he struggled for other reasons too with contact, and I think it just may be something that has to come. But it could take him a little bit longer than we'd like at the plate. And I'm not sure what ultimately his offensive profile is at the major league level. Is he a guy who gets on base at like a 350 clip and hits 15 to 20 homers? And if that's his profile, that's a decent ball player. But is it a premier shortstop? Because his glove doesn't matter, in the fantasy world, right? It's not really a premier player from a fantasy perspective at that position these days. If he steals a ton of bases, that's one thing. But he doesn't have that kind of speed. Good speed, but not like that kind of speed. So I'm willing to buy him now because I think his value has come down in a lot of leagues, whereas I thought he was too high to buy before. So I think from a real world standpoint, I'm excited for Mason Wynn because his feeling does matter there. I think he's going to save a lot of runs, and I think he's got a good makeup, and he'll do a good job fitting in with that team. But I've been looking to acquire him and hopefully not having to pay too much for him, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do we really think like Marmol is gonna start within like a month or at the start of the year at short next year? Because I mean, Paul DeYoung is a free agent, so
True.
I don't think DeYoung's coming back. I don't think he's coming back.
yeah.
If I had to bet, I think Mason Wynn starts at shortstop on opening day for the Cardinals next year.
Right.
He vastly improves the defense, and I think they can put him in the 9 hole and just let him figure it out. Be a little patient with him. They have other options. They can move Tommy Edman over there if they have to, assuming Edman returns. They can always start Gorman at second. So we'll figure it out. And they have Donovan too. So I think he's going to get a shot. I don't know, Jeff, what do you think?
I mean, I think Marmol's the worst manager in baseball by really far. I mean, I'm just shocked and mortified that he wasn't fired after the way this season went and the way the decisions that he made and the clubhouse culture and everything else. So I have no faith in him to do the right thing ever. But, you got to invest in your future at some point. And I think everybody knows the Cardinals have to spend all their free agent dollars on pitching and roll what they have from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, so, unless they move some players.
And
you brought up.
Go
on.
I was gonna say they have a great lineup. They can afford to give Wynn a little bit of time to develop, I think, and bat him in the 9 hole and let him kind of find the swing.
You brought up clubhouse culture, which I think when Wynn came up, the team was already just totally shot.
It's true.
And I kind of see, based off like the interviews that we've had with Wynn, that he's a very competitive player, and when it is more difficult to compete when there's nothing to compete for. It's like, oh, we could win enough games to not get last place, which didn't happen.
Yeah, I hear that. On the other hand, he's competing for a major league roster spot. I mean, like,
did you see,
I don't totally assign that.
Yeah,
but
I watched some Memphis games and they were having fun down there. That was a competitive team that was hit, like they were slugging, they were beating the crap out of people. They came up to St. Louis and it's just everyone's a bummer and Ollie's walking around being a douchebag and like I don't know. It didn't seem like a very fun place to be in that clubhouse to me. From everything I saw.
We'll see if Ollie returns, next year. So we'll see.
Yeah. What football teams do you guys root for?
I'm a Miami Dolphins fan.
Okay. So you got a great coach in Miami.
Yeah, for sure.
We do.
Yeah. Jeff, are you a fan or?
There's a Dolphins flag back over my.
Oh, really? Okay. So yeah, you guys are both Dolphins fans.
I'm from St. Louis, so I was a Rams fan, and they moved, and I've been a free agent forever, and down here in Florida, the Dolphins are so fun, so I've been kind of rooting for them and watching them.
There you go, another convert. I like it.
But not a Bucks fan, even though you're in Tampa.
I like the Bucks too, but I mean, I really don't like Tom Brady, so last year I couldn't root for them.
Yeah. Well, all I was going to say is that I'm a Chargers fan, and Brandon Staley just pisses me off to no end. And I'm just like, I kind of have the same vibe I get from Staley, where he makes baffling decisions that I get from Marmol, where Marmol, baseball coaches, I feel like have way less input on making baffling decisions as football coaches, because it's like it's the same. Everyone's going out there trying to hit the ball,
right?
But in football, a little more complex with what a coach needs to do. And I just feel the same way, where both Ollie with his just personnel management and Staley with his management just are confusing.
Right.
Well, we can all contemplate the long off season and what Marvel will be doing next season.
I mean, okay, so like surely next April does not go as poorly as this one with the whole Contreras. Like, we're not going to have the same. Is Contreras going to catch or not? Although Herrera's kind of been good. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But like, surely it's not going to be as bad. There's not going to be a WBC excuse. Everyone's going to be at spring training together. Like, how bad could it really get again?
It could be really bad if they don't get pitched.
I mean, this had to be like worst case scenario. April at least. April had to be worst case.
April was terrible. April was terrible. But I mean, look, it's an old adage in baseball, right? Momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher. Like, let's see him build a rotation because they need help.
What they've said, they're gonna assign 3 guys.
We'll see what they do. I'll believe it when I see it. And it's like, winning breeds happiness.
Right.
And Cardinals get a rotation, and with that lineup, they can be good, but they need a lot of work. I
don't think it's a very desirable location for teams to want to go at this point. I mean,
players to go?
Players don't want to go. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're going to have an easy time bringing in top tier free agents, unless they just dramatically overpay.
No, I also think that Marvel's kind of torpedoed that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, listen, guys, this was a lot of fun doing our first roundtable. I really appreciate you taking time out of your evenings to do this. And Dave on a different time zone. Appreciate it.
I'm just saying, it's earlier for me than you guys. You guys are at 10 p.m. right now.
We're getting there. But really a pleasure to have you on, Jeff and Dave. Your second appearances on the show. I would love to have you on again. And we'll be entering the off season and see when the next podcast will be. I'll have to figure that out. But in the interim, remember to ABP. Always be prospecting.
That's right. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
See you, Dave.